Hi, I'm Bob Acton, the host of the Color and Ceramics podcast. Welcome to the show today where I share with you my conversation with Maricelle Olivier from Australia. She draws deep inspiration from the safari landscapes of South Africa's Kruger National Park, a place woven into her childhood through generations of family visits to the Bosveld or Bushland. These early experiences continue to shape how memory, place, and emotion surface in her work today. Through a meticulous process of drawing and etching each line by hand, Maricelle builds visually dynamic ceramic surfaces that sit somewhere between landscape, abstraction, and emotional mapping. Combined with layered color, her work becomes an embodiment of lived experience rather than a literal depiction of place. Now based in Canberra, Maricelle holds a Bachelor and a Master of Fine Arts in Ceramics from the National Art School and is represented by Sabia in Sydney. Her work has been exhibited widely across Australia, including Sydney Contemporary and the Powerhouse Museum's Clay Dynasty exhibition, and has been recognized in major national awards and collections. In this conversation, we talk about drawing as a way of remembering, surface as emotional terrain, and how childhood landscapes can continually guide an artist's practice. I'm really looking forward to sharing this one with you. Let's meet Maricelle. Maricelle, thank you so much for joining us on the Color and Ceramics podcast. We are very excited to have you on board because you are from the other side of the world from us, down in Australia. And probably more important is I love your work. And so I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with you about you and your journey in clay and of course, your beautiful work. So thanks for coming on board.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bob. I'm really excited for this conversation with you.
Yeah, I think it'll be great. I'm really looking forward to it. Now, I wondered if you could give people a little sense of your journey in clay. I know that you have moved to us. You're in Australia and you've moved from South Africa, if I got that correctly. And so, can
Yes.
you tell us a little story about how you got into clay? Um, I often think people get addicted to clay once they get their fingers in it. So that may be true for you too. And so if you could just tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, of course. So I was born in South Africa and we moved to Australia in 2008. So I've been in Australia for, I think, nearly 20 years now. But my parents, so I'm with my parents and my brothers in Sydney, and I've always loved doing art. Like I've always done art, always drawing, very creative. My mom's very creative as well. And I think, moving from a place that is so deeply rooted culturally, in with our language and just the way that people are there, visiting the wildlife conservation parks there as well. And my mom has all these beautiful South African artifacts in her house. So I feel like it's always been, I've always been surrounded by a lot of color and beautiful things. So I think that really translates down into my art. But did, I had a great art high school teacher, and she was like, you should do ceramics for your major artwork for year 12. And I was like, okay, like we've done a little bit of ceramics at school, not a lot. Like I've never touched the wheel, just a little bit of an introduction to it. And I did slip casting in year 12, which is quite a, I think, advanced technique to do for a year 12 student. But I absolutely loved it. I loved the process, the setting up, thinking about your ideas and putting those ideas into 3D. So as I mentioned, I love to draw. So just transferring that drawing into an object is what I absolutely loved. And then I didn't find my work at the time. My teacher did it, but when it came out of the kiln, it's like magic. You've got this work in your hand, and you're like, I made that from pretty much scratch, from clay, but So she was like, you should go to art school. And being an artist was not something I've ever anticipated. I've always wanted to become a teacher. Like I wanted to teach art and English in high school. So, I applied to do that at uni, but I also applied to go to National Art School in Sydney. At the time, also, people were like, it's notoriously hard to get into National Art School. So I was a bit nervous, but I got in and I was like, I'm just going to see how I like it. So I deferred my other degrees and then I was like, I'm just going to do a year at art school. If I really love it, I'll keep going. If not, I'll just, I've got a backup. Absolutely loved it. Like fell in love with all the disciplines that we did there. And drawing is a really strong foundation there as well. So I feel like it just seamlessly, like, I don't know, everything just sort of came together. Got introduced to the wheel and I was like mind blown. Absolutely loved it. Um, so I continued that and I finished my Bachelor of Fine Arts there. Applied again to do a postgraduate in teaching. And my mentor, she was like, you should really think about taking it further and doing masters. And I was like, oh, really? Like, I didn't, like in my mind, I'm like, I didn't even think about that. And then, so my third year for my major work, I threw like really small, delicate porcelain cups. And I just did very simple colored glaze, like accents on the bottoms and on the lips and everything. So I looked at my work and I was like, yes, actually, I would love to do more with the surface. Like I just want to dig into that surface of the clay. So I applied, got in, and I was like, okay, I'm doing my master's in ceramics, which I also absolutely loved. It's really challenging. Like they really push you to think about what you want your work to say. And that's where my South African heritage came in because, art is I believe is an extension of all of us. It's, something that like comes from your mind and it's working through your hands and then it's out there for the world to see. So worked through a lot of ideas with that. And that's how I got to the work that I pretty much make today. It's been like, I've been doing it for 10 years now. Like I finished back in 2018 and I graduated. Um, yeah, and that's how I came to fall into doing ceramics. And I worked out in Central Australia as well for 2.5 years. I mean, that's really a dream, isn't it? Like finishing university and then finding pretty much a full-time job in ceramics, working, doing what you love. So I worked out there. It's very isolated, like it's very, sorry, I've forgotten the word now. But it's like 4.5 hours out from Alice Springs and where Uluru is. So it's like literally in the middle of Australia. It's 3 hours from there. Um, Very remote. That was the word I was looking for. Very small Indigenous community. So I worked there at the art centre, helping the artists in the ceramic studio. They make amazing work as well. But just the landscape there as well just reminded me so much of South Africa. Like it's very deserty, but they have buffalo grass, which unfortunately there it's like a weed, but just buffalo grass there. And then there's buffalo grass in the safari lands in South Africa as well. And they have beautiful birds there as well, parrots. That's very colourful. That's where I found how to work with colour on my ceramics is I looked at the Australian avifauna, like the colour combinations of them, and I started working those colours onto my work. So out there, like everything also just felt like it sort of came together. And then I met my husband there, out in the desert in the middle of nowhere. And then we got married in Canberra. And so that's why I'm in Canberra now, which is also great. It's a really great art community here. I've had a lovely studio at Canberra Potters, where I think, yeah, after I left Ernabella, which is the community I was working in, I feel like my career sort of like shot up, just because I had that dedicated space. I could really like get into what I want my work to say and explore all the colors. And um, I think my slip lines really got so refined, and my forms and everything. So yeah, that's how I got to do ceramics.
Very good. That's a great story. Now, can you describe your work for people? Of course, I've seen it, and this is an audio only podcast, and we'll have links to your website and Instagram page and all that kind of stuff. But I wondered if you could just describe what it might look like to somebody when they first encounter your work.
Sure. So in person, they are quite big. My largest works are about 50 centimeters wide, but they're quite squat. So they're very round, sort of like a really fat basket, really, is how I like to describe it. And they swell out the belly and it comes really close together, narrow opening at the top. Um, Very organic forms. I hand build all of them with coils, but I work very slow with them, and they're quite symmetrical. And then I paint like sometimes a very bright colored seam down the middle, on both sides, so that that breaks up the surface compositionally. And then my classic style is doing three different patches of color, then going horizontally from that. And then I fill my little slip trailer. So it's a little tool. It's got a very thin uh, nozzle at the end, so that then I can draw very thin lines. So I usually use different colors on those patches then, and I draw like sort of like grid lines, so very thin lines, one by one. People sometimes think I use a mechanism. I've heard people say, oh, she must use a net or must use a stencil. And I usually go, no, I draw them one by one with my hand. So I think, yeah, collectively, it's just a very colorful work with lots of layers of color.
Mhm.
And the lines bring out a bit of texture and dynamic on the
Mhm.
surface.
For sure.
Yeah.
Now, are you using colored slips? Like, do you add your own stains to a slip, or are you using underglazes? What do you like to
I
use?
use I use underglazes. I have used slip, but I find colored slip, but I find colored slip is just a little bit too thick for the lines that I want, and also I have to then find that perfect leather hard stage of the pot to work with. Um, and sometimes when I've worked with slip, the lines will peel off, and it would make me very sad because I've spent hours doing those lines, and then yeah, they peel off because I think I've worked on it when it's been too dry. So yeah, I like to work with underglaze. My pots have to be a little bit drier than leather hard, because otherwise that little nib on the slip trailer leaves little like indents in the pot, sort of like sgraffito, but I don't want that. I want like, a smooth surface with the lines too. They don't stand out as much then as slip lines, because the underglaze is not as thick, it's thin. So it sort of melts into the surface, but it still leaves a little bit of a texture. So, and also underglaze, I can just depend on that color is going to then be the same, because when I paint one patch of color, I usually do the lines on the different color on the other bit of the pot. So I want those colors to be the same. Sometimes I'll mix underglazes together, because you can mix underglazes like acrylic paint, if I want to create like my own gray, or pinks are very hard with underglaze. I've never been able to find a good pink. So I usually just mix reds with white to get like a really good pink. So then I mix up a big tub because I know I'm not going to be able to match that again.
Yeah,
But yeah, I just like that I can depend on underglaze to give me the color that I want.
yeah.
And the
They're
good thing about underglaze too is like, you see what you get. So
absolutely, absolutely.
yeah.
Now, do you finish your pieces with a clear glaze, or are you leaving the underglaze raw?
No, I leave them raw. So because my work is so big, I don't glaze them. Sometimes with my smaller work, so I sometimes throw smaller terracotta, or I've started working with black clay as well. So I use different clays. I use white raku and BRT. Um, do you guys use BRT as well? Like,
I don't even know
no.
what
So
that
it's
is.
so white raku is just a white raku
Yeah,
clay. So I like hand building with clay with grog in it.
yeah.
And then BRT's buff raku trachite. So it's just a dark color clay with iron specks in
Oh
it.
yeah,
So if
yeah.
it fires above a certain temperature, you get that beautiful
Hmm.
speckle. Um, so I just like to use different clays because I don't glaze the inside of my work. I sometimes leave a little clay at the top raw, so I don't paint over that so that you can see the different clays. And when I sgraffito down my seam line, you get that pop off clay color coming through. So usually, yeah, with a show, I want like a variety of clays because I think visually it works quite nicely, in contrast to sort of superficial bright colors with like the raw colors of the clay. But because they're so big, I don't glaze the inside. So I single fire most of my larger works, leave them raw, and then I seal them with liquid quartz. So it's this specifically made, it's pretty much just like a brick um, sealer, but it's specifically designed for ceramics. So post firing, wipe them all down, sand them, and then I seal them with liquid quartz. So it just creates a layer of protection from like, the oils of our hands,
Yeah,
any creams you might have, and it's just easier to wipe down. So
yeah. And so
yeah.
your sealer, uh, are you trying to create a bit of a shine to your surfaces with your sealer, or is it more of a matte sealer so that you don't see
Yeah,
that shine?
yeah, it's a matte sealer, so it doesn't leave anything. So I brush mine on, but you can spray it on as well, and it dries and it's just invisible. Like you can't really see it, so it's an invisible
Yeah,
protective barrier.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, that's great.
yeah,
Um, now, in your color choices, when I look at your work, there are multiple different colors that I've seen in your work, sort of some darks and terracottas and contrasting whites and creams. But I also see bright greens and reds and so on. How do you think about that when you look at your uh, jars of underglaze, and you go, okay, well, which one will I pick for this particular piece? How do you think about that?
yeah. So I have a lot of test tiles in my studio. I think testing. I mean, everyone hates testing, right? Like, because you just want to get to like the fun, good part of ceramics. But I think testing is just so crucial because sometimes the underglazes, even though they're really easy and user friendly, sometimes they don't come out the way you want them to. So I've got a lot of test tiles in my studio, and um, I take a lot of inspiration from my environment. Like I said before, the starting point was Australian parrots. For a lot of my work, I usually have a theme running through my solo exhibitions. So I think about what I want, the different works to say about what I'm thinking about. So for Sydney Contemporary, I think that was like one of my biggest shows. I took particular inspiration from the Kruger National Park, which is just a safari park. It's one of the biggest ones in South Africa. So I thought about all the different animals, and the green that you speak of. I thought of like a chameleon because, like, they're quite, very green there. And then I've just got different brands of underglazes, and I go, okay, I want a green pot because I want it to reflect, the chameleon. And so I hold all my little test tiles together. I usually do 3 or 4 colors. And then it just depends if I want my seam color. Sometimes it's the same as the other colors I use on the sides, but sometimes I use like a very different color for my seam color to make it pop. So yeah, I just hold the colors together. Sometimes I'll just think as I'm making the work, I'm like, oh, I want to make, an all black pot, but how can I make the colors different? And that's where I like, combine my own underglazes. So I'll have black and I'll just start adding little bits of white until I create that charcoaly grey colour in contrast to the black. Um, I've made an all white pot, and there I used, slip because it gives you that creamy color. And then I just used white underglaze because it's stark white compared to that creamy color slip. Um, so I think it's just, yeah, it started with like, just playing with colors. And then the more you work with colors, the more, I guess, confident you get with the combination of colors that you use. I'm also not afraid to use, you know, bold color choices because I think a lot of the time people are afraid to use color. So, when I'm teaching or doing a workshop, I'm always like, don't be afraid, just do it. If it looks bad, you can make a new pot.
That's right. Yeah.
Obviously start small. Don't do, wild choices on a massive pot that you've spent days constructing. But I always say to people, like, don't be afraid. Sometimes I've picked colors and I've started painting it and I can already see I don't love it. So then I have to go back and I have to sponge it back and start again. But that's also the beauty of underglazes is you can just,
Mhm.
wipe it back on your
Now,
work. So,
now I hear you about that because I use similar materials as you, so I understand what you're talking about. But often I'll use underglazes on bisque, and then it's much easier to wipe off if you don't like it. And how do you find the experience of wiping off underglaze on on maybe a drier than leather hard dry piece? How does that work for you?
it's messy. I haven't done it a lot. I've done it maybe like 2 or 3 times, but it is messy.
Okay.
But I don't know, I don't want to say a perfectionist, but I have my very particular ways of working. Like, so I'll just be working very slowly, sponging it back with a clean sponge. And you just have to continuously do that until all the underglaze is off. And then I just have to wait for that bit to dry again. So usually when I work, I've got like 2 or 3 pots on the go. So I'm not working just on one pot because I feel I would just get frustrated, sitting there like, you could dry it with a heat gun, but then that part of the pot's dry and you can run into issues of that then cracking. So that's why I've got a few works on the go just to, not test my patience. Um, and I just wait for that to dry and then just paint it with another color. And then I'm usually like, yep, that's happy. Just keep going. Yeah.
Now, you've used the word patience, and when I look at your work, I think about how much patience you must have because, you've talked about the lines that you draw on your piece. They're
Mm,
very small. At least they appear to me on images,
yes.
quite small. And my guess is it's going to take you quite a while to do that because you've got this piece that's, got various shapes to it, both vertically and horizontally. So you'd have to move the form around a little bit in order to get the line on it without it dribbling down the side. So tell us a little bit about how you make the form, and I'd love to hear about your notion of how you manage your patience.
Sure. So I think in like I am quite a patient person, but I do think my practice does like, push that further. Like people say, I don't know how you can do it, but I think if you love doing something, you'll just spend all your time doing it. It's like you said, like it's an addiction. Like I think my lines for me is addicting. Because I think once I get to my lines, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've almost finished my work. So it's sort of like signaling that completion of the piece. Um, because I find hand building the piece is the most challenging. It's not the line work, it's the building the work because I coil all my works. So that in itself takes really long. And I have to think about, the swelling of the pot. Like, so I build my pots up in sections because if you build really big round works, you have to wait for the clay to dry, otherwise it'll sag. In all my years of hand building, I've learned the very hard way. You get to the top and I've built my pot too quick and it starts sagging at the very bottom. And, also like cracking and everything. So I build my works up in sections and that's why I work with like 2 or 3 works at a time. So I build it up. I'm happy with like, what the bottom part looks like because the bottom part is also the most important because that will then dictate the rest of the form of the work. So how big my work will be. So I have to, if I want my work really big, I have to start with like a really white base of like, slab, build my coils up from there. I section off each part with like just a strip of plastic at the top to keep that clay workable. And then the other section can just firm up. So it doesn't dry completely. It just gets firm. So my test is I have to grab it and I can't wriggle it. um,
Yeah.
so that it's like, I'm like, okay, yep, it's firm enough. Um, and I don't like to use a heat gun because with my work, it dries the surface and I need that workable because I do my little sgraffito line and I don't love to work on bone dry work because sometimes that little needle will also scratch the surface and I don't like to create dust from a, safety perspective of working with ceramics. Um, so, like constructing the works, it already takes me 3 days to maybe make two pots, two really big ones. I spend a lot of time smoothing the surface because I don't want my finger marks or, rough marks on there with like interfering with my very delicate lines. So I spend a lot of time doing that. And then I have to wait for, the pot to then dry a bit more. I put a really thin layer of slip on my dark clay bodies because otherwise the underglaze sort of gets sucked in and it doesn't like, pop as much as it should. So that then you have to wait for the slip to dry. And then my seam lines also take very long because I freehand them as well. So, to get like a straight line is very hard, even for me, So I usually draw it on with pencil, um, standing back, looking at it, making sure it's straight. Because some of my if you look closely, some of the lines on my work, the seam line is a little bit crooked, but sometimes I leave them because I'm like, I'm not a machine. I don't want it to be super perfect. I still want someone to be able to say, oh, someone made that and there'll never be another one pot like this. And then once I've done the seam line, then I can start painting the other sections of my work. That's also 3 layers of underglaze. So again, that takes very long. I'm also freehanding it. So the straight lines where the sections end, that's all like, free. So I put them on my banding wheel and I stabilize my elbow on the table. And I just go really slow. Brushes is also really important though, I think, with working with underglaze because nice soft brushes will not leave, those like coarse lines. And they hold a lot of underglaze, so that helps as well. And I've got like, 3 different sizes of brushes going because I have to get into the little corners to make sure I've covered every surface. And then once that's finished, I wait for my work to dry a bit more and then I can start my lines. So by the time I get to my lines, I'm like, oh, yes, this is like the quick part. Like the lines is like, so yeah. But then if I want to get to the bottom part of the pot, I have to then lay my pot, I lay it down on like a piece of foam, like a
Mhm.
mattress, on a table. And then I do my vertical lines first. So I lay it down. So I do the hard bits first. So I lay it down, I do the bottom bit first, and I work my way up to the top. And then once I get to my horizontal, I put it on my banding wheel and I stabilize my arm against my body or my table or the table, and I just hold my hand still and draw them on that. So yes, a lot of patience, but I just love it. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
said, like, if you love doing something, you'll spend hours doing
yeah,
it.
yeah, absolutely. I get you there. You know what? Have you had a challenge in your work? Like you've talked about, building the forms with coils. You've talked
Mm,
about underglazes and the connection to the land. What about a
mhm.
challenge that you've experienced and how you overcame that challenge?
Um, I think just constructing really big works is challenging in
Mm,
itself. I've um I've had I've finished my work, so I've spent like, let's say 2 weeks on a pot and you finished it. And even before it goes into the kiln, I could see that there was a crack where I've left the bottom part of the pot too long to dry and the coils they didn't like bond together well enough and my pot's cracked even when I've finished the surface and then I'm not going to fire that work. So that work is down the drain. I've put work that's like um, perfect, not in inverted commas, like perfect. I've
Yeah.
put it in the kiln, and you come and you open it, and it's just not the way I thought it would look, or like the underglaze has bubbled. So I've had a lot of challenges, and earlier I would get really upset. I would, because I'm quite an emotional person, I would probably cry, and I would call my husband and be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm never doing ceramics again. It's too hard. I put my heart and soul into it." And and with the added pressure of exhibitions as well, to me, making a living off ceramics, then to me, I'm like, that's like money that's just going down the drain for me. Um, but like over the years, I don't know, you sort of got to toughen up with ceramics because it's part of it, right? Like you have to have failed pots. You have to have cracked pots to understand what you've done and learn from your mistakes. But also sometimes it just happens. It's ceramics, Sometimes I just look at a work and I'm like, oh well, that's ceramics for you. So I've gotten to a point now where if a work cracks, I'm like, oh well, whatever. I'll just remake that work. If it comes out of a kiln not looking great, I just hammer it because I don't sell seconds. So I just like, put it in the tip and I like hammer it, and it's quite cathartic, getting rid of that and being like, whatever, it's in the past. So, um, that's, yeah, challenging. And I also think, um, sometimes the pressure to make work for shows, because I've had back-to-back shows, that's also been challenging. Like it's hard on my body, making works that big. So you sort of I have to make sure I'm upright, and I've had shoulder injuries. My wrist sometimes starts hurting. My fingers hurt from holding the slip trailer. Um, so that's challenging. And then also thinking, oh my gosh, how am I gonna, am I gonna sell all my work in my show, or are people gonna like buy my work in my open studio? So like that's challenging as well. But I don't know, for some reason it always works out. People, one person will come along and love your work. So yeah, there's good days and bad days, but um,
It is true.
I
There's
think yes.
No, I think it's true. I think there is a lot of challenges with clay. The other day I was thinking about what's the most intimate way of making art there is. Like I was thinking about painting, right? And so in between there's the piece that you're putting the paint on, right? A board or a canvas. And then you've got this distance with this brush that you hold in your finger over, right? And yet with clay, you have your hands right in it. So it seems to me that clay is very intimate with us, and that creates a vulnerability with us because you're now sharing your story and sharing your heart with the vulnerable connection to the clay itself. So that can be very challenging for people if they're not if when they get stressed with a crack or something didn't come out of the kiln or whatnot, right? I pulled a piece out of the kiln this morning and I went, oh, that's not what I was looking for. How did that happen, right? And so, and then you go, well, it's clay. I'll just make another one, right? But
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
I know what you mean. Now you
Yeah.
teach. How do you help your students get to that spot where they're okay with a mistake, where they're okay when I pulled my piece out this morning and I didn't cry. So how do you how do you help people get to that spot?
Um, I think you just look at it and you say, it's really not that bad. I know like you've spent hours working on this piece, but we usually say before you even start your piece, like break up with your pot, like just break up with it now before you even start, because yeah, you could spend hours like throwing a pot beautifully on the wheel, trimming it, surface decorating it, glazing it, and you open the kiln and you're like, oh, wow, wow, like that's not what I envisioned. Um, but I just tell people, you've just got to learn from like what you might have done wrong or what you want to do differently. Nobody like really moves forward without making mistakes, or something doesn't always go your way that you wanted. So I always try to just be lighthearted about it and go, oh, that's a crack. That's okay. Just make another one, you know. And then they start to like, you know, be like, oh, but I really want to try. And it's like, by the time you've tried fixing that work, you could have created another one and it might even look better because you've already done it once. So I think it's about, yeah, just being like, just let it go. You know, it's really hard. Like it's taken me very long to get to a point where you just have to let it go. But you know, it's an organic material. Like you sometimes, like we can't control absolutely everything. And I think that's why people keep coming back to ceramics as well. You know, it's that challenge in itself. You could be a master in throwing, let's say, porcelain, but you'll still have days where you open the kiln and probably your whole kiln's worth is like, you know, down the drain, and you're like, okay, I've got to go back and problem solve that now. So I think that's why people keep coming back to ceramics, because it's like challenging in itself. Like, you know, how can I make it better? How can I make my next piece better? Because yeah, even like, you know, if you look at my work 10 years ago, like it might look similar to the works that I make today. But if you look closely, like they're very different. Like I've had a lot of like, you know, steps along the way that I've had to change. Um, yeah, and I think that's what's the fun thing about ceramics too. You know, it keeps you on your toes.
It does keep you on your toes,
Yeah.
and when I've chatted to potters around the world, one of the things that strikes me is that we're all pretty good problem solvers. That
Yes.
you need to be able, because clay and the whole process of firing up to these crazy temperatures and hoping what you get out of the kiln is what you thought was going to go into the kiln. Like all that requires problem solving, that you have to think it through, and then the next iteration and the next iteration,
Mm.
to me is a key piece. So that's really good to hear that you, who are very experienced at this, making beautiful work, even you have struggles with those kind of things.
Yes. Of course, yes. I also think, you know, in today's like, you know, technology filled world, it's so nice to do something tactile with our hands. And to yeah, problem solve it with our own brain and not like, you know, have chat GPT to always answer our questions for us. So I think that's another thing that I really love. Like, you know, with ceramics, you can put your phone down and switch off and really immerse yourself in, you know, what you're making and think about, oh, okay, this didn't work out last time. What am I going to do differently this
Mhm.
time?
There's
Um,
a there's a
yeah,
the tangible quality of it, I think, is
yeah,
really important. It was for me. I was a psychologist in my career, and often I felt that I missed that in that kind of work. And that would be true for digital work, I think, sometimes too now,
yeah.
that I didn't have something tangible that I could say I created that or I made that. Whereas with clay, I can certainly do that. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Hey, Maricelle, it was wonderful having a conversation with you today.
Mm.
Thank you so much. And I hope you all the best. I know you've recently just have had a baby, so that's put you into a whole new world of challenges and patience, as we talked about.
Yeah.
And so you'll be good at that now that you've had the experience with clay.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, well, thanks so much for having me, Bob. It was really nice to talk to
Yeah, it was
you.
great. Thank you.